I'm a pretty big union supporter in general. The idea of people getting together and to collectively bargain with their employers for better wages, benefits, and etc. I think that that's fundamentally American. I think it also, unions democratize the workplace, and it generally helps to lift wages of everyone around. And there's empirical data to back that up. That being said, I find myself ironically opposing a union. Now, what in the world is going on here? It's not so much opposing the union, but the recent actions of a union, specifically the United Mine Workers of America. Now, why would I oppose the union itself? Well, once again, it's not the union, it's their actions. What are they doing? Well, on Tuesday, they went to Washington to oppose the new EPA regulations on power plant emissions. Now, it makes sense. Mine workers, they normally mine coal. And coal, of course, goes into power plants. Those emissions, reduces the viability of coal and therefore threatens their livelihood. I understand that. Now, UMWA Vice President, he told the crowd of about 700 people that, quote, "We are fighting for our livelihood. We have to let the president know. We need to let both parties know that we will support candidates that support us." And this is sort of where it's hard for me to be against these guys, because it is people's livelihood. It's their jobs. But then you have to look at the alternative. Now, these guys work in the coal industry, as I said. Coal just happens to be the dirtiest fossil fuel that we have, that we can burn. It's also the most dangerous. Mine work isn't easy. And if it's a choice between clean air and a few thousand jobs, I think the choice is obvious. Now, of course, with so many fellow progressives having that same mindset and attitude when it comes to coal, it understandably pisses off these guys. Especially since they've noted that they have supported progressive causes. Daniel Kane, UMWA Secretary-Treasurer, said just that. Quote, "We fought for those progressive causes, and there are people today in the progressive movement who have forgotten us. It's not that we have forgotten about you. It's that there's too much at stake if we don't take more action to curb climate change. Climate change is the single most important issue facing humanity at large in the 21st century. It's about perspective. You have to look at the bigger picture when it comes to these types of regulations. And I know that's easy for me to say, since it's not my job on the line. And I completely understand that. And I completely understand why people would try and protect their livelihood. It makes all the sense in the world. And that's why why it's so hard for me to come out against these guys. Because it's I understand them, and I understand where they're coming from, and I empathize with them, as much as it seems that I might not be. But there are some things that are more important. Now, here's some statements I want to read from the protesters, and this comes from the Huffington Post. UMWA President Cecil Roberts said, quote, "What is going on now is the EPA is passing laws, and we all have to abide by them. These rules could not pass a vote in the United States Congress." And that, of course, has to be because of the Republicans and corporatist Democrats. Republicans hate the EPA. They want it disbanded, eliminated. Get rid of the EPA. We don't need no stinking regulation. Get rid of it. So, of course, it makes sense that they wouldn't allow any sort of updates on EPA rules to go through. So it's left to the EPA to make its own rules and pass those through on its own, under their authority, under the Clean Air Act. It makes sense. Now, Cecil Roberts continues. "These are the best jobs in Appalachia. No bureaucrat has the right to do this." Now, he also argued that the U.S. should not go forward with emissions regulations while countries like China don't have these limits in place. China's getting away with it. Why can't we? All right. For one, I hate this argument. That's sort of like a kid seeing another kid, person's kid getting a toy and saying, why can't I get one of those? Why can't I do it? Or they see another kid doing something wrong. Why can't I do that? Well, because you can't. It's wrong. But China can do it. China also routinely abuses human rights. Does that make that okay? I'm not comparing the two issues. They're not the same, but it's the same principle behind it. So let's get some more quotes. This comes from Mike Malerney. He was a 69-year-old retired miner from the local 1188 in Zanesville, Ohio. He said, quote, "If you shut down all the coal-fired power plants now, what would you use for electricity in the United States?" That's a good question, but ultimately it's also a fallacy, because no one in their right mind would do that. I'm not advocating for that. I'm sure a lot of liberals are not advocating for that, if they know anything, because you can't just do that. There needs to be a transition period. Besides, the EPA says, quote, "Coal will remain a critical part of America's energy mix for the foreseeable future. In 2030, it will represent a third of our nation's energy mix." Now, I personally think that that's way too much. And I also think the proposed regulations on coal power plant emissions are a little too weak. They're on the weak side. But a lot of these miners mistakenly think that it's these regulations that are killing the coal industry. But it's really not. It's more economics. There are more economic factors at play than just regulation. There's also competition from different energy sources. For example, fracking. There's been a fracking boom. What's really important about this, and what I want to touch on here, is what was said by the vice president of the UMWA a bit earlier in the story. He said, quote, "We need to let both parties know that we will support candidates that support us." And you know what that means? That means voting for Republicans and corporatist Democrats. For example, Allison Lundergan Grimes, Kentucky. She's running against Mitch McConnell. She is incredibly pro-coal. And it's not just her that's pro-coal. A lot of our politicians, even on the Democratic side, are pro-coal. For example, in the 2012 debates, debating with Mitt Romney, President Obama was attempting to be Mr. Coal. "Oh, I love coal." "What are you talking about?" "I love coal." Don't you guys love coal?" "I know I love coal. Vote for me." Both he and Romney were both unabashedly on the side of the coal industry. So let's get back to the workers. Once again, I sympathize with the workers. But at the same time, we simply can't do nothing while the climate continues to warm, just so we can keep around a few 100,000 jobs. History shows that new technology ends up destroying old industries. But at the same time, it creates new industries to take the place of those that are gone. I'm pretty sure the carriage industry felt the same way when the car was invented. And we got more jobs out of that. Old industries are replaced by new industries. And that's the way it's always worked. This will be the same thing. And besides, coal has also been in the downward slide for years now. Even without these regulations, demand for coal has plummeted. And automation has already cut into existing coal jobs anyway. So once again, it's not the regulation entirely. It's a mix of different things. New energy sources, automation, that's cutting into these coal jobs. New technology, everything. It's essentially a dying industry. And I think it's one that should die and be replaced by something better, cleaner, renewable, and can actually give people a safe work environment.